You're holding cash right now and you think you're being smart. You think you're being patient. You think you're protecting yourself. But I need you to hear this clearly, even if it stings. If you're sitting on cash going into 2026, you're not safe, you're exposed, you're slowly bleeding, and you're calling it discipline. You were taught that cash equals security, that money in the bank means control. That if nothing moves, nothing can go wrong. That belief is outdated, dangerous, and it's costing you your future. Inflation doesn't care how careful you are. It doesn't care how long you work. It doesn't care that you're trying to do the right thing. It quietly eats your money every single year, and you clap for yourself because the number on the screen looks the same. You're not standing still. You're moving backward. And the worst part, you don't feel it yet. That's why this is so deadly. You only feel the pain later, when the life you planned costs more than the money you saved, when retirement looks impossible, when freedom feels like a fantasy, when you realize you played defense your whole life and still lost. Let me be blunt with you. Cash is not an asset in an inflationary world. It's a liability wearing a mask. Most people don't understand this, and that's why most people stay stuck. They think wealth is about how much money you have. It's not. Wealth is about what your money does when you're not touching it. This is where the conversation gets uncomfortable, because it forces you to look at your own behavior. An asset puts money into your pocket, even when you're asleep, even when you're sick, even when you're not working. It produces, it grows, it adapts. A liability takes money out of your pocket constantly, predictably, forever. And here's the part people hate admitting. Most of the things you call success are actually liabilities. That nicer car, monthly payment, that bigger lifestyle, bigger bills, that upgraded apartment, higher rent forever. You feel rich for a moment, then pressure becomes your new normal. You're not building wealth. You're upgrading stress. Cash feels neutral, but it's not. In a world where prices rise year after year, cash loses purchasing power. That means your money is working against you. You didn't invest it, but you also didn't protect it. You just let time weaken it. Let me give you a simple example. If you have $100,000 sitting in cash and inflation averages 7%, you didn't save that money. You lost $7,000 of buying power in 1 year. Do that for 5 years and tell me again how safe you feel. Now compare that to owning an asset that produces income or adjusts with inflation. The difference isn't intelligence, it's mindset. Here's a short story that stuck with me. I once watched two people with similar incomes make opposite choices. One saved aggressively and refused to invest because he was scared of losing money. The other invested consistently, not recklessly, but intentionally. 10 years later, the saver was angry, complaining about prices, blaming the system, terrified of retirement. The investor had options, not because he was lucky, but because he accepted responsibility early. Fear cost one of them a decade. This is the mistake you need to confront. You're more afraid of short-term loss than long-term erosion. You panic over market swings but ignore inflation stealing from you every single day. You avoid volatility but accept guaranteed decay. That's not logic. That's emotion. And emotion is expensive in finance. You don't win by avoiding risk. You win by understanding it. You win by positioning your money where it can fight back instead of surrendering quietly. Cash has a role. It gives flexibility, gives opportunity, gives you the ability to act. But hoarding cash as a long-term strategy is financial laziness disguised as caution. Cash is a parking lot, not a destination. If you've been telling yourself, I'm waiting for the right time, ask yourself this honestly. Waiting for what? Certainty, permission, a guarantee. None of that is coming. The people who build real portfolios don't wait for perfect conditions. They act with discipline, education, and patience. They understand that money is a tool, not a trophy. And here's the hard truth you need to hear before 2026 arrives. The world isn't getting cheaper. Debt isn't disappearing. Inflation isn't going away because you're uncomfortable. If you hold excessive cash, you are betting against reality, and reality always wins. Smart money doesn't ask, how do I feel safe today? It asks, how do I stay ahead tomorrow? That shift alone separates owners from workers, builders from savers, free people from stressed people. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to be reckless. But you do need to stop pretending that doing nothing is a strategy. It's not. It's a slow leak that drains your future while you're busy feeling responsible. In the next part, I'm going to break down exactly where smart money goes when it leaves cash, how to think in terms of ownership instead of fear, and why most people sabotage themselves even when they finally decide to invest. If this made you uncomfortable, good. That's awareness kicking in. Like this if you're done confusing cash with safety. Comment below if you're ready to start thinking like an owner instead of a saver, and subscribe because part 2 is where we turn this wake-up call into a real plan. You think the hardest part is deciding to move your money. It's not. The hardest part is realizing how many habits you have that quietly sabotage you the moment you try. Because here's what happens to most people. They finally accept that holding cash forever is a losing game. They finally admit that money has to work, and then they rush straight into the next trap. They confuse activity with intelligence. They start chasing instead of building. They swap fear of inflation for fear of missing out, and instead of being disciplined, they become emotional in a different direction. This is where portfolios get damaged, not saved. You don't lose money because you invested. You lose money because you invested without a framework. Let's get something straight right now. Smart money does not panic into assets. It relocates with intention. There's a big difference. Most people say they want assets, but what they really want is excitement. They want a quick win to make up for years of inaction. And that mindset is poison. An asset is not something that makes headlines. An asset is something that produces value over time. something boring enough to be ignored by the crowd and strong enough to survive cycles. And this is where people still mess up the definition. If something requires constant cash injections from you just to exist, it's not an asset, it's a liability with better marketing. You buying something and hoping it goes up is not ownership. That's speculation. Ownership means the asset has a job, it produces income, reduces dependency, or protects purchasing power, preferably all three. Ask yourself this question before you put a single dollar anywhere. If this doesn't grow or pay me over time, why am I holding it? Most people never ask that. They buy because someone else bought. They invest because someone else made money. They move based on noise, not logic. That's why they panic when prices move, because deep down they don't know what they own. Let me give you a real-life example. I've seen people sell productive investments the moment the market dipped, then proudly sit back in cash saying they're waiting for clarity. What they actually did was lock in loss and choose decay. They felt relief for a few weeks, then inflation kept moving, opportunity passed, and eventually regret showed up quietly. They didn't lose because the market dropped, they lost because they had no conviction. Conviction doesn't come from confidence, it comes from understanding. When you understand the difference between assets and liabilities, you stop reacting and start positioning. Here's another common mistake you need to hear. People think diversification means owning a little bit of everything. That's not diversification, that's confusion. Real diversification means owning different assets that behave differently under pressure, not random things you don't understand. And no, that doesn't mean spreading money across 10 liabilities and calling it balance. Smart money is selective, it's patient, it doesn't chase shiny objects, it builds slowly and compounds quietly. This is where your relationship with time matters more than your intelligence. Most people want returns fast because they waited too long to start. They want urgency to make up for procrastination. But urgency without discipline is how money gets destroyed. You don't fix years of inaction with one aggressive move. You fix it with consistent, intentional ownership. And let's talk about income for a moment, because this is another illusion. Income feels powerful, it feels safe. But income without assets is fragile. The moment your income stops, your entire life pauses. Assets don't care if you're tired, they don't care if you feel motivated, they just work. That's the difference between earning money and building leverage. Most people never build leverage. They just work harder and hope that's enough. Hope is not a strategy. Now here's the part that stings the most. You don't need more information, you need fewer excuses. You already know holding cash forever is a losing game. You already know spending everything you earn keeps you trapped. You already know that assets are the only way out. What you're avoiding is responsibility. Because once you accept that, you can't blame the system anymore. You can't blame your job, you can't blame timing. You have to look at your choices, and that's uncomfortable. But discomfort is cheaper than regret. In 2026 and beyond, the people who survive financially won't be the smartest or the luckiest. They'll be the ones who positioned early, stayed disciplined, and understood that money is a long game. You don't need to predict the future. You just need to stop pretending cash is protection. Protection comes from ownership, from assets that adapt, from income streams that don't rely on one source. In the next part, I'm going to push you harder. We're going to talk about long-term positioning, what happens if you don't act, and how to think like someone who doesn't need permission to build wealth. Because awareness without action is just another form of self-deception. If this is forcing you to rethink how you've been handling money, that's the point. Like this if you're ready to stop reacting and start positioning. Comment if you're willing to take responsibility for your financial future. And subscribe, because part 3 is where we bring this all together and draw the line between comfort and control. You don't need another warning after this. You need a decision, because everything you've heard so far leads to one uncomfortable conclusion. If you go into 2026 holding cash the same way you are now, you are choosing comfort over control, you are choosing familiarity over strength. And years from now, you will remember this moment and wish you had acted. Let me tell you what really separates people who survive financially from people who dominate. It's not intelligence, it's not timing, it's not luck, it's ownership. Owners think differently. They don't ask how to avoid pain, they ask how to build leverage. They don't wait for permission. They don't wait for certainty. They understand that money rewards those who move with discipline, not those who freeze in fear. You've been taught to treat money like something fragile, something you protect by not touching. That mindset keeps you small. Money is not fragile, your mindset is. Cash sitting still does nothing for you. It doesn't grow, it doesn't defend you, it doesn't create options, it just makes you feel temporarily calm while time works against you. And time is undefeated. Every year you delay, compounding works for someone else. Every year you hesitate, assets move further out of reach. Every year you tell yourself you'll start soon, your future self pays the price. Think about that version of you 10 years from now. Older, tired, less energy. Do you really want them working harder because you were too scared to act today? This is the opportunity cost nobody talks about. Not the money you lose on a bad decision, but the life you lose by making no decision at all. Let me share one last observation. I've never met someone who said, I regret building assets too early. But I've met countless people who said, I wish I had started sooner. Regret doesn't come from action, it comes from delay. This isn't about copying anyone. This isn't about chasing trends. This is about understanding one rule and living by it. If it doesn't produce, protect, or compound, it doesn't deserve your money. That rule alone will save you from decades of stress. Cash has a role, but it's a tool, not a strategy. Assets are the strategy, ownership is the goal. Control is the reward, and control feels different. You stop panicking over headlines. You stop obsessing over prices. You stop feeling trapped by one income stream. You don't need to be fearless. You need to be intentional. You don't need to rush. You need to move. You don't need perfection. You need positioning, because the world is not slowing down for you. Inflation is not waiting. The cost of living is not going backwards. And the gap between owners and savers is getting wider every year. You're either going to be on the side that complains or the side that compounds. There's no third option. So here's the line you need to draw for yourself. Not tomorrow, not next year. Now. Stop confusing cash with safety. Stop rewarding yourself before securing yourself. Stop delaying the work that builds freedom. You don't need permission to take responsibility for your future. If this series forced you to think differently, that means it did its job. Like this, if you're done playing defense with your money. Comment below what kind of asset mindset you're committing to build. And subscribe if you want more truth, more pressure, and zero comfort. Because comfort is expensive and control is earned.